USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Week in Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. A look at this weekend in college hockey and a review of the top news of the week.
Welcome to Weekend Review for Monday, February 24th, 2020. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. This episode is sponsored by the NCAA Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th in Detroit. For tickets, visit ncaa.com/Frozen4. Jim, what a crazy weekend, and what a weekend for trying to determine standings, and a whole bunch of them around the conferences are still wide open. Well, let's just jump in with both feet. Let's start with the game of the week. It was a two-game series between the two Massachusetts schools, UMass and UMass Lowell. A split.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, UMass probably feels like they deserved a better fate. They really, I thought, for much of the series, outplayed the Riverhawks. They outshot Lowell 16-2 in the first period on Friday night. Out-attempted them, I think it was 24-2. And they actually were tied 1-1, and it could have been 2-1. The second shot for Lowell, their second shot on goal, went in, but was disallowed. They said it was goaltender interference. Anyways, UMass comes back. They have a lead in the third period in that game, and then two kind of random goals. The game winner came with, I think, about 27 seconds left, and UMass's goaltender was trying to pick up a stick or get a stick back from the defenseman, and a random shot gets thrown on net. He never sees it coming. It goes in. So Lowell wins that game, and then a night later, I thought Lowell had a good start, but UMass absolutely dominated them in the second period, take a 3-1 lead. And it seems like it's lights out. Lowell had no life going into the third period. But, again, here they come. They rally. And don't forget, UMass is one of the best third-period teams in the nation. I think they entered the weekend with a plus 27 goals differential in the third period. But here UMass Lowell came back yet again, rallied, tied the game, and had some chances to actually go ahead. But it was John Leonard. John Leonard had a great weekend, I thought, for UMass. Gets the hat trick. He scores the last two goals, the last one into an empty net with about a second or so left. But UMass was in a position to maybe potentially get 0 points out of a weekend that I thought that they dominated for much of both games. And it ends up being a split. And for UMass, that was really necessary because they were starting to slip. And if they had lost that game on Saturday night, they would have been out of a home ice spot. Now they're at least still in a battle to potentially catch Boston College for first place.
And we'll talk about those Hockey East standings in a moment, but a couple other series from the weekend. It was actually Thursday, Friday. Home ice for Northeastern on Thursday night at Matthews, a 3-2 loss to Boston College. They go to Conti Forum the next night on Friday night, and BC puts on a 10-1 thumping over the Huskies.
You know what? I don't want to say that I'm not surprised by the 10-1 because I am. But I'm not surprised that BC won in a dominant fashion because they won the game on Thursday night, but I thought that they played better than a 3-2 score indicated. I thought that they could have won that game 5-6-2, 6-1, really. I mean, some random plays here and there, and the fact that Northeastern was in a one-goal game surprised me, but BC, I thought that they really dominated that game from start to finish, almost what we were just talking about with UMass. And then they go in home ice and they do what they're known to be able to do, and that's just keep scoring the goals. 10 goals on the night, a 10-1 win. These are two teams that, nationally ranked teams playing each other. The number 5 and maybe it was number 6 and number 10 teams against each other in the country, and here we have a 10-1 outcome. It's not what you expect, but when you look at how much BC dominated that game at times on Thursday, I guess maybe the fact that they won in a convincing fashion on Friday isn't overly surprising.
A team that really had a disappointing weekend. Merrimack was out of the Hockey East playoff race, but they swept home and home with Providence. That has really got to hurt the Friars. Friars shut out on Friday night. This is a high-flying, high-scoring team. What's going on with the Friars?
Yeah, they're struggling. They're struggling of late. I don't know what it is. The last time I saw them was I guess it was the first week of January out in Las Vegas when they won the Fortress Invitational out at the Vegas Golden Knights Arena, T-Mobile Arena. And I thought, boy, this is a team they're poised. They're ready for a great second half. And it just hasn't come. I don't know what has really happened to Providence. I don't know that it's injuries. I haven't, really gone up and down their lineup every weekend to make sure that they're healthy, but they've lost their confidence. There's no doubt about that. They're now below 500 in the league. They're a good weekend for New Hampshire, which is in ninth place, away from possibly missing the Hockey East playoffs. Right now, home ice feels like it's an absolute long shot. All Providence has is 2 games left. It's a home-and-home series with Maine that will be played over the course of 2 weekends. One, I believe it's each Friday night the 2 teams will play, but this is a little crazy. I thought that this was a Providence team really poised to do some good things here in the second half. They just haven't proven it, and it's surprising. There's no doubt that surprising is the easiest way to talk about their fate. And hey, I want to also give a shout out to Merrimack, because that's as much of playing the spoiler role as you can as a lame duck. Your season's over, there's no playoffs, and you just played 2 of your best games of the season against a very good team. So hats off to Merrimack for not just throwing in the towel, but making sure that they remain as competitive as they possibly can.
Question for you. You and I have both served on the Hobey Baker Award Committee in the past. When you take a player like Jack Dugan, who had been mentioned around Hobey, how does the downward trend of his team hurt him in the Hobey Baker Awards? I think that's one of the things that gets talked about, how well the team is doing around a player. That could be an impact on that, too.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. And I've seen that so many times, that you have very good players and then their teams don't get to the NCAA tournament, and that they're not getting some eyeballs, down the stretch, and suddenly they're just dropped out of the conversation. So that's going to affect Providence if they don't go on some sort of a run here and get themselves back into a postseason position where they can get to the TD Garden and get to the Hockey East semifinals and find a way to get into the NCAA tournament. I don't see Jack Dugan or Tyce Thompson, who, listen, there's no way that he can't be mentioned as well. I mean, 19 goals and 43 points. He's right up there as well. I just don't know how you find a way to put these 2 players near the top of your list if they're not playing in the most meaningful games.
Well, speaking of Providence, they end their season home and home with Maine. Maine got 3 out of 4 points, a 6-1 win on Friday night over Vermont, and then on Saturday, a 0-0 overtime tie. And that overtime tie ended up hurting Maine in the PairWise quite a bit. In that position in the PairWise, where you're depending a lot on winning percentage, and you're playing a team that is very low in the PairWise, a tie even like that makes a big difference when you're kind of precarious around the bubble.
Yeah, it certainly hurt a little bit. Give it to Vermont, another team. I mean, this is a team that easily could have quit. But I actually think that they've played pretty loose the last couple of weekends since they were eliminated from the playoffs. And I actually thought that Vermont had chances to win this game. I look at it, they had a 2-on-1 and a breakaway late in the third period of that game. Nearly scored, and Jeremy Swayman had to be excellent for the Black Bears, and Stefanos Lekas, obviously the other end was as well. But it hurts Maine. Maine, if they get that win, they're up in second place. Now they're in third place. They're kind of battling it on the PairWise bubble. They're now on the wrong side. They're going to have to continue to win to find ways to get in. But that's been their struggle, is that sometimes they just haven't won games against opponents that they should be beating. And that's something we know, that's a formula that if you go into the NCAA tournament, you have to win the games you're supposed to. And even though it's just 1 point, it's just one tie out of a season, it's one that's going to be harder to stomach if they miss the tournament.
When we look at Hockey East standings, Merrimack and Vermont are out. As you mentioned, New Hampshire and Providence might be battling for that last spot of the 8 teams that make it into the playoffs. But what is really fascinating to me right now is that nobody has clinched home ice. I mean, BC all but has, UMass very close, but only Boston College and UMass, of the teams that are in the top 9, the teams still left for the tournament, those are the only ones who have clinched a Hockey East berth. There are still permutations and combinations that could knock Maine in third place, could be knocked out of the tournament if the wrong things happen. This is got to be the wildest Hockey East finish we've ever seen.
No doubt. It really is. And, there's just, it's the unbalanced schedule perpetuates a little bit of this. The fact that Maine only has 2 games left, whereas a team like New Hampshire still has 4 and Northeastern still has 4. So there's, that alone is a lot. There's too many games in hand for the fact that there's only 2 weekends to be played. That's a little bit crazy in and of itself. And then add in the fact that it's tight. I mean, after it's 26 points for second place, 25 for third, 24 for fourth and fifth, then 23 points for sixth, and then you have a big gap, 2 points down to seventh place. And I mean, that's one game, Providence and Northeastern. And Providence, the more precarious position out of those teams. Northeastern still 4 games to play. But Providence just 2. We mentioned that Providence and Maine only 2 games left. So it's crazy. This is as tight of a season as I have ever remembered. The fact, I think it's still 7 teams have a chance to win the league championship. And we only, for some of these teams, there's only 2 games left.
Why don't we go to the NCHC? A tough weekend for North Dakota, and they were missing some key people. But North Dakota, a tie and a loss at St. Cloud State, that's got to really buoy the Huskies. But for North Dakota, a little bit of a stumble. They no doubt will lose first in the USCHO.com poll coming out later today. May drop as far as third. Probably nothing really to get too concerned about with the Fighting Hawks, but a little bit of a stumble late in the season.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where you have a coach that anything that has any potential to be serious. Bradbury has been sitting players, and that included Hobie Baker candidate Jordan Kawaguchi on Saturday night. Just a small injury. I think that if it was a playoff game, he'd been playing, but you sit him out, and you pile up enough of those, and it makes it a little bit more difficult to win. I get that, but at the same time, good for St. Cloud. We talked about it last week, I think, on Game of the Week, how well they've been playing since the break, and here they are rolling. They're still trying to find that position to get into home ice, and it looks like it's kind of a long shot, but with 2 weekends left, they're less than 2 games out. They're 4 points out of a position for fourth place. So, the thought that they could get there and position themselves to get a home ice from where they were at Christmas time, it's downright amazing.
Yeah, and when we look around the league, Western Michigan did themselves a favor with a split with Minnesota Duluth. I've liked this Western Michigan team all season long. Injuries we've talked about with them, they are moving in the right direction as we come to playoff time. And it would not surprise me to see the Broncos come out of the NCHC with the title. I don't think they would be favored, but, a little bit of an upset. Who knows?
There's no doubt about that. I think that they've been playing some of their best hockey at the right time of year. We always talk about that being a key component. And this is a playoff that, once you get out of the 2 out of 3 round, once you get into single elimination, you're going to talk about 4 teams that, if the top 4 teams make it, North Dakota, Duluth, Western Michigan, and Denver, all 4 of those teams can beat one another any given night. So there's no favorite. And then you throw in a team like if St. Cloud were to get past a Denver, if they face off against each other, or say, it's one of those situations that I think that you might have 5 teams that can win this. I don't see, Miami, the way that they played this weekend, no way. Colorado College, they've been weak in the second half. Omaha had their little peaks and valleys, but they haven't played well of late. But you have 5 of your 8 teams playing extremely well in the NCHC. It's not just going to be a good race to see the positioning of who finishes where, but once you get to those playoffs, I think it's anybody's. Of those 5 teams, it should be anybody's race.
Well, we got a whole bunch more hockey to cover, and we'll get to that in a moment. This episode is sponsored by the NCAA Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th in Detroit.
This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online.
Every time you show up, every time you make your presence heard, whether you clap your hands or stomp your feet, lead the chant or join the chorus. However you choose to be a fan, you make the game. The NCAA Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th at Little Caesars Arena in Detroit. Visit ncaa.com/Frozen4 to get your tickets today.
Welcome back to the Weekend Review podcast for Monday, February 24th. Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. In the Big Ten, it was an opportunity for two teams tied in first place coming into the weekend to open up some space. And the team that came away with 5 out of 6 points was Penn State.
And was the team that needed it, because that was it for Penn State. They are done. They finished their regular season a week earlier. The 7-team league. There's only 6 teams that can play in the final weekend. So one team has to have the bye. It is Penn State. They're done, and they have that 4-point lead. And there's nothing guaranteed. You have both Ohio State and Minnesota trying to catch you. They're both 4 points behind. Even Notre Dame technically still in the mix with 35 points, 6 points behind. But here's Penn State saying, "Hey guys, catch me if you can." We put our foot down. We did as best as we could. We got 5 out of 6 points. See what you can do now, because I think that was the only statement that they could make. I thought that they did a great job both nights. 2 very good games. I got to see most of both of them. And I really thought that they played good hockey. Minnesota was a tough opponent, but somehow Penn State was able to find that way to get the extra point on Friday night. It was late in the 3-on-3 overtime that they finally scored, and then win the game straight out in regulation on Saturday. So they put themselves in the position. Now it's going to be up to the other teams. Can Ohio State, can Minnesota, can Notre Dame find a way to put things together this weekend and catch them and maybe take the title?
The team that is in the driver's seat with that is Ohio State. They control their own destiny. Minnesota, apparently losing tiebreakers to Ohio State, needs a little help. But right now, only Penn State has clinched home ice in the first round of the Big Ten. And as we know, for a couple of weeks ago, Wisconsin already clinched 7th place in the conference. We'll get to Wisconsin in a little bit. I don't think the Badgers are by any means out of some noise in that Big Ten playoff situation. Wouldn't it be something to see 7th place win that league? But Notre Dame, Minnesota, Ohio State, Michigan, all in the mix. Even Michigan State still can get into that first round bye in Big Ten hockey. It's going to be interesting down to the wire. This is a league where they've kind of all beat up on each other, and it's really hurt their position in the PairWise. It
really has. I mean, you only have one team with 20 wins, and that's Penn State. And you're right. This is you nailed it on the head, because they actually have a pretty good out-of-conference winning percentage of the Big Ten. And the fact that they really have crushed each other within the league. Notre Dame went on a big winless skid. Minnesota was a slow starter. They've come on. Ohio State looked great, and then they slipped a little bit. Penn State had a big slip, kind of a month-long slip there. And then Michigan State, we thought that they were the dream team. They've fallen back. Michigan, awful start. They've kind of put it into drive, but then last weekend, losing twice. Wisconsin's the only team that really has been consistent, and unfortunately it's been consistently bad. But everybody else has just demolished one another. It's almost like eating your own. If you're, I know that's a bad expression, but they've really cannibalized themselves in trying to find teams that are going to get into the NCAA tournament. Ohio State, they're in better position now. Minnesota's even getting themselves into position, but Penn State really feels like the only team that is solidly in this tournament right now.
Looking to the ECAC, it's a 2-horse race, Cornell and Clarkson. Cornell sweeping the weekend, has a 2-point lead. But the team I really want to point to first here is Harvard. Harvard, a big upset, 5-2 win at Shield Arena over Clarkson, a tough place to play. And then they go lose 6-3 the next night over at Appleton Arena to St. Lawrence. So Harvard could have helped themselves out a lot more over the weekend, but that's sort of been the story of Harvard this season.
Oh, Harvard, what have you done to me? I mean, I think I sat there in January and said that they were going to go on a run in the second half, and they've done anything but that. And Friday night, I said, hey, here we go. This is it. Harvard is playing good hockey now. They just beat Clarkson. Now they get to play the last place team in the league, and it should be an easy second win, and they get thumped. I mean, they fell behind 4-0 in that game, just never really in it. They made a little bit of a rally in the third, but I don't get it. I just don't get it. And I'm sure Teddy Donato is scratching his head just as much as I am. Because they did not win on Saturday, it makes getting home ice a little bit more difficult. And in the first round bye, of course, in the ECAC, RPI is kind of nipping at their heels. RPI is playing some really good hockey down the stretch. The other side of that win on Friday for Harvard is the loss for Clarkson, and that puts them 2 points behind Cornell. They weren't able to keep pace as Cornell finished off the weekend sweep. I think that Cornell, they're obviously in the driver's seat heading into this last weekend of the season, but you hope that it wasn't a missed opportunity for Clarkson. They're going to have a first round bye. They're locked into second place at worst, but I think that they really wanted to try to keep pace in this one and hopefully get a co-championship type of situation. That just became much more difficult for the Golden Knights.
It's not out of reach, though, because they do play this weekend. They are going to have Cornell and Colgate up north at Clarkson and St. Lawrence. So it's a chance for a tie, and then you got to get into tiebreakers. But it's going to come down to the last weekend. You mentioned RPI. They have at least home ice in the first round, and they still have the opportunity to finish in the top four. So, yeah, at 11-8-1 in conference, a terrific season for RPI, especially as of late. They've picked up some big wins, and they're going to make some noise. Quinnipiac still hanging in there in all of this. They cannot be in first or second place, but they can still finish as high as third.
Yeah, and I like the way that Quinnipiac has played down the stretch. You know, they've had some hiccups, and it's been the inability to get those 4 points out of weekends back to back to back, stuff like that, that has kept them from not making a run at the title. But I feel like they're in very good position to get home ice and should likely do so. I think they just need 1, maybe 2 points out of this final weekend. But I like the way that the Bobcats played down the stretch. They're going to be a competitive team in this tournament. And we say it, once you get to that single elimination up in Lake Placid, that's when everything kind of changes.
They could have opened up some space, but a 4-0 loss to RPI and a tie with Union over the weekend didn't help the Bobcats. But I agree with you. They're in a good position. Well, let's go to the WCHA. Bemidji State keeps its winning ways going, but it was also a terrific weekend for Bowling Green, one that they needed to have, a pair of wins over Ferris State. And Bowling Green now is in a pretty decent position for home ice in the WCHA. They're now in a tie in points with Alaska as we come down towards the last part of the season in that conference.
Yeah, and this was a big weekend for Bowling Green. I think that was really the key, is to put yourself in a position to at least compete for that home ice. With 2 weekends left, you don't want to be out of things. No way that they've sewed much up here, but they probably can control a little bit more of their destiny. This conference really is a battle of two teams, and it has been almost the entire season, with everybody else is kind of the also-rans battling for that 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th position. You still have Northern, Bowling Green, Alaska, Michigan Tech in there in that mix. So we'll see where that goes over the last 2 weeks. Minnesota State, they did clinch at least a share of the title. And that's, something that they can hang their hat on, and just need 1 point out of the final 2 weeks of the season. They'll be okay in terms of taking home that title. We thought that they were going to be the first team to clinch, and boy, we were wrong about that. But they did come really close. At least they've clinched a share of the title, and that's, I think, just as big as anything.
Well, when we look at clinches, we saw one happen over the weekend in Atlantic hockey. As American International, the Yellow Jackets, who have won 11 straight games, now to 20 league wins on the season. That's only happened twice in the last decade in that conference, 20 wins to win the conference. And AIC, with just 2 games left, they have sewn up first place in Atlantic hockey. And Sacred Heart can go no lower than a tie for second in the league standings, and they have clinched the 2nd seed. So it comes down to this. Army and RIT will either be 3rd or 4th in the league, and those are the 4 teams that get a bye and home ice in the 2nd round. 3 teams now are going to battle for that 5th place position, the first round bye, and then on the road in the 2nd, and that is Robert Morris, Air Force, and Niagara. Robert Morris is at Niagara this coming weekend. Air Force is at RIT, and the interesting thing about Air Force, they are in the mix with this because they have been so successful in the bonus point. Between 3-on-3 and shootout wins, they have 5 points in that. They would be way out of the mix if it weren't for that.
Yep, those bonus points always mean a lot. But I do want to go back to AIC. I think I did the math out on Saturday night. It was January 17th, I think was the date. They were 11 points out of first place. And it seemed like they were not even going to be able to make a charge at being a back-to-back champion. Since then, 11 straight wins, and they locked up the title with 2 games to play. So impressive. Just love the way that they – so impressive. Just love the way that they finished this season here. And they're going to go into the tournament yet again, the hottest team. I don't know what it is in the water out there in Springfield, but Eric Lang seems to have his team playing their best hockey back-to-back seasons at the right time. They're a dangerous team. They find ways to win games. They score goals. They're getting good goaltending. They're doing a lot of the things right. And here we are. I mean, this is a team that, don't forget how many bad seasons this AIC team had. And, there were times where people were saying, do we really need a program at AIC? And do they belong in even Atlantic hockey? And now we've seen, yes, they do, because Eric Lang has done great things with this program, taken them to the highest bounds that they've known, and I'm really proud of this team. Listen, one other thing, that the all-time record for wins for this program was back when they were an independent team back in, I believe it was 1988. They had 24 wins. And if AIC is able to advance to the conference championship, there's a chance that they might tie that 24. And if they win the conference championship, it's almost no doubt that they're going to beat that 24 wins. So this is truly a storybook. You thought last year was as high a peak as AIC could go, but they have a chance to go a little bit higher this year.
They've got most of last year's team back. It's a heavily upperclassman-laden team. They could end the regular season with 22 wins in conference. They have Sacred Heart on Wednesday and Army on Saturday. The last 2 times teams won 20 games or more in the regular season in Atlantic hockey, Niagara, who was upset in the league championship but got in as an at-large team, and then RAT's 2010 Frozen Four team won 20 games. So it's pretty rare, and the teams that get there seem to have some pretty good success. One other thing I want to mention about AIC is they got back goaltender Zacharias Skog, who had been injured for a while, but his counterpart, Stefano Durante, was in net through a lot of that stretch of wins. So they are in great position. Eric Lang has got a lot to look forward to in Springfield. Well, there was one non-conference series this weekend, and it was an opportunity for Arizona State to lock in the NCAA tournament. Had the Sun Devils beaten Wisconsin on both nights, they would have been as high as about number 7 in the pairwise. Right now, with the 2 losses, they've dropped to 13. Still very good odds to be in the tournament, but it's not a lock, and they got to do a lot of watching. But a weird weekend. We're watching scores come in on Friday at another game, and we're seeing, it's 4-3, 4-4, 5-4, 7-6 loss to Wisconsin. What a weird game that was, and then just kind of getting beat badly on Saturday, 6-2.
Yeah, it was certainly a strange weekend, no doubt, and it was a weekend that I don't think in the long run it's going to be damaging, but as you just said, I mean, you've just changed your whole positioning in the pairwise. You could have been this up in 7th in the pairwise and in a position to maybe stay there throughout the entire postseason, as you're not playing and other teams are, and they're winning and losing and moving, and the odds of you falling at the X, there was no chance. If they had won both of those games at Wisconsin, they had clinched their NCAA fate. Now it's a little bit of a wait-and-see game. I still feel good about them at 13. They're probably not going to fall a lot below 13 at this point. You never know the teams that are just below them, if they can move on up. But it's where the uneasiness comes in. Is you had the chance to be 100%. Now I think I have them at 81% to make the NCAA tournament. You have no more opportunities to control your destiny, so you're going to have to wait that out. Plus, from what I understand, I don't have the player's name, but for the second consecutive year in their final game, they get a player that was assessed a game disqualification. So they're going to go, if they do make the NCAA tournament, they're going to go into the NCAA tournament without one of their players. I mean, it's kind of crazy how things have played out back-to-back seasons for Arizona State. They're now going to go into basically an entire month. Maybe it's actually more than a month. They're going to go a month plus a week between games. So that's basically 5 weeks between games. And you'd like to go in on a higher note. And this just did not set up well. I still think that they're going to be fine. They're going to make the NCAA tournament. Their odds are very high still. But it was a tough way to close the season. Let's put it that way.
They lost a third pair of defensemen in that to the disqualification, so that may not be a terrible hurt for them into that. But when you get into single elimination, it's a big deal. But where they have to worry about things is if they drop one position, but especially if they drop 2 positions in the PairWise, they're really going to be in a difficult position because there are a lot of very good teams that are a little bit behind them. And if they are outside the PairWise bubble and win their conference, that could push the line from 15 to 14 or 13. You see names like Michigan and Michigan State that probably can't get up there in the PairWise that have a chance in their league. Quinnipiac, Harvard, Dartmouth, Rensselaer, all could challenge for the ECAC title. Hockey East, you got UMass Lowell and Maine kind of nipping on their heels too. Western Michigan, not too far behind them in the PairWise. Even St. Cloud State with a good run in the playoffs could get there to kind of push them down. They have a chance. And then when you look in the WCHA, Northern Michigan, Bowling Green, even Michigan Tech, those are all teams that could challenge for that. So you could see conceivably it would be a perfect, or for their case, imperfect storm. But you could see ECAC, WCHA, Big Ten joining Atlantic Hockey with auto bids that push that line up to as high as number 12.
Yeah, it does take a lot. I don't remember the last time we had 4 teams that were outside of the top 16 in the PairWise that all won their conference tournaments and created that much of a mess for teams that were sitting on the bubble. But it does take a lot, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. And that's just one of those things that as you sit there at 13, anybody that said 13, 14, 15, well, 15 most obviously, but anybody that's in that position, it makes that whole conference championship weekend such an uneasy time.
It was also a weekend that for Wisconsin could turn things around a little bit as they head into the Big Ten playoffs, because some players who had not gotten on the scoreboard kind of got off the schneid. A hat trick for Roman Ashan on Friday. This was a good weekend for Wisconsin in games that really didn't mean a whole lot.
Sure, certainly. It's a good time to score points. You're going into your playoffs. I think I heard it. It was Rick Gotkin at Mercyhurst who said this a few weeks ago, maybe 3 weekends ago. He said we have 7 games left in the season, and there's 7 exhibition games, because after that is when everybody resets to 0 and we have another chance. And that's the position all of these teams are in. In these leagues where every team makes the playoffs. You can be in last place. You can be a Wisconsin and have a disappointing season, but your one chance to turn it around is the night when the playoffs start and everybody goes back to 0-0 in their records. And if you're playing well going into that, you're dangerous. We saw it. I mean, I don't know how far back it is, but there was definitely, I believe it was Alabama Huntsville back in the days of the CHA that went from a last place team, went through their playoffs, didn't lose, and next thing you know that they had an automatic bid to the NCAA tournament. I think they were 9, 10, 11 games under 500 going into the tournament. So it can happen. That's why the postseason is played. You see it in basketball a lot more than hockey, where you get into more single elimination, where you get a 13 seed in the Big East or in the ACC coming out of a tournament and winning it. It's always possible, and that's why we play the games. And it's what makes these playoffs just that enjoyable in college hockey.
Well, Jim, as we close, it was 40 years ago today that the impossible happened. 2 days after an upset of the Soviet hockey team, USA beat Finland to win gold. And I have very vivid memories of that. I was living in the dormitory as a freshman. A couple of weeks before that, somebody had stolen the color TV out of our dormitory lounge. My roommate, who was away for the weekend, had this little 9-inch black and white TV. So there were about a dozen guys crammed into our dorm room watching that game. Afterwards, the campus just kind of exploded, and a couple of quads over in the dormitories, this spontaneous quad riot happened with chants of USA, IBM punch card holes, and I'm dating myself here, obviously. Well, you do the math anyway, if I was a freshman in 1980. But toilet paper rolls coming out of windows, and somebody got from a big pancake restaurant this humongous American flag. They were lined up around it like firemen catching people out of windows, bouncing people up in the air, and chants of USA, USA. When you see the beginning of the movie Miracle and the montage of sort of the malaise and right into the hostage crisis and everything, it was a downtime for America. That win really sparked a lot. And for a couple of hours, a whole bunch of college students were out on that quad at RIT just cheering USA, USA. Campus security came by, scratched their heads, took a look, and said, well, just let this thing peter its way out. But, what an amazing memory that is 40 years ago today.
It certainly, I was in kindergarten, so I'm a little younger than you, obviously. But I still remember it. I don't remember that vividly. I remember my family, my mother, who's a huge hockey fan, being excited about it. I've obviously watched Miracle, and I've watched the great documentaries that have been made. And I actually had my 7-year-old daughter watch the HBO special, which was "Do You Believe in Miracles," which was very well done, about an hour-long documentary this weekend, on Saturday, so she could understand it a little bit better. It was a great time. The one thing that now we're looking 40 years later, I really wish that the team had kind of stayed politically neutral this year and kind of not gotten into the presidential BS that's out there. No matter which side you sit on, making a choice to stand behind Donald Trump with "Make America Great Again" hats isn't a good look. Not because of a political statement, but because you're talking about a president that has kind of been notoriously aligned with Russia, through so many reports. And, as somebody put it to me, he said, hey, it took 40 years, but Russia finally won. And I don't want to taint this team. This is probably the last time that you knowingly will be able to celebrate this with most of your members. Once you get to 50 years, now you're talking about guys that are 72, 73. You'll have a few guys probably be deceased by that time. This was your last time to really go out there and really celebrate it. And I don't know that that was the best look, but you're right. It was a good moment for America when they needed it 40 years ago. I'd like the U.S. to do it again. I'd really like to find a way. I don't know if we're going to see it in my lifetime. When they brought the pros into the Olympic Games, I thought it was really competitive, and I thought we saw some great Olympic hockey. I don't know if the NHL will ever allow that to happen again. But unfortunately, I don't think we're going to see these types of great championship teams again, as hard as the United States works, because they're always going to be professionals against youth in the future. So regardless of it, that's kind of my take on the whole thing. It is a good moment, and I'm glad I had the chance with my own daughter to relive a little bit of it 40 years later.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for Weekend Review for February 24th, 2020. This episode has been sponsored by the NCAA Frozen Four, April 9th and 11th in Detroit. For tickets, visit ncaa.com/Frozen4. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.